let's go over a couple different ways to connect meshes when the source geometry that they're on isn't totally connected. So in this case, I have two surfaces. I got a surface on the left side and a surface on the right side, and we're viewing by topology so that we can see that red edge between them indicating that the surfaces are not connected. So if I go to General 2D Mesh and I mesh this side with a size of 1 and this side with a size of 0.8, we'll see that the nodes in between are not effectively connected. So there's a couple different ways that we can make sure that the nodes are connected. Obviously, the simplest way is to go to Geometry and then stitch these edges together. You just click on the red line with the stitch tool, and then it turns green. And then when you do a mesh, it will recognize the associativity regardless of the mesh size that you give it. Okay, but what if stitch isn't an option for whatever reason? Well, one of the next options is to use equivalence. So I can mesh one side with that mesh density, mesh this size with a different mesh size. So it's different, but I can use the density tool and change the density on that edge until they're about correct. So now I can see that these edges, these nodes are pretty much at the same point. And then to make sure they are tied together, I'll need to go to the Validate tab and equivalence these edges together, or equivalence the nodes. So I can click the components that they're in, do preview equivalence, and as long as the nodes are close to each other within this tolerance here, we'll get these golden nodes that indicate there's going to be a connection there. So I can do equivalence, make the magic happen, and then I can make sure that there is associativity, there's a connection between each of those nodes. Okay, backing up a couple steps. Okay, the next trick is also pretty clean. We can use associate to make sure that the nodes on this edge of the left surface are associated to the right surface, and then when we do a mesh, they'll automatically already be connected. Let's go to the Elements tab and find Edit Elements, Associate. We'll select all of the nodes on the left-hand side, and then we'll choose a target surface on the right-hand side, click the play button, and now when we go to General 2D Mesh, even if we give it a different mesh size, it's going to have associativity on that edge, which is very good. Okay, the last trick that I have, if I Control Z a couple times, is to go to the Geometry tab and use Imprint. Imprint is very close to Associate in that we're going to take nodes and make sure that those nodes are going to appear on the other surface. The only difference is it's going to create points embedded into the surface, and that can be good or bad depending on your needs. So if I go to the source, I select all of these nodes, and then I go to the target and click that surface and click Imprint, and I hide all these elements. You'll see that we have points all along the right surface. We're gonna get a node there no matter what. So we'll go to General 2D Mesh, we'll mesh this, we can show all of our elements, and we can see that everything's connected. So that's a couple of different ways to do things in 2D. There's definitely more, but here are some new ways to do things in 3D. I have these solids over here, and although they're right on top of each other, they're not connected at their interface. So if I go to do a tet mesh, and I try and tet mesh these two solids, I'm not going to get connection between them. So I can hide some of these elements, and you'll see that there is no connectivity between those two solid meshes. So deleting those meshes, one of the easiest ways that you can connect solids together is just by going to Geometry and finding our Boolean tool right here. And I can combine these two solids, use the Keep Common Interface checkbox. You can see the interface in yellow, and now when I do a tet mesh, they are going to be connected, and they are going to have nodal connections between the two meshes. So I can see if I do my usual Control J trick to go by adjacent, that they are connected. I can hide some of these elements, and we'll see that there's the connection between the two solids at their interface. Okay, so that's pretty slick. But what if we don't do that? What if we can't do that? Maybe the solids are a little bit far apart. Well, the last trick I have for you is to use imprint and then 2D mesh. So I'm going to use Tetra Mesh on this solid over here and mesh that. And then I'm going to go to the Geometry tab and do imprint. And I'm going to grab some of the nodes by face. I'm going to grab them on that face of the solid. So there's the 4 nodes there. Press OK. The target will be this solid and click imprint. So now I can hide that. I have these points where I'm definitely going to get nodes on this solid. And what I'll do is I'll do a general 2D mesh first of all of these surfaces. Click mesh on that. Make sure it's a tet mesh. And then I can go to Tetra and mesh this component. Make sure it's component. So you're going to get 2D elements on the outside, but on the inside, you'll have those solid elements that we love and we want. You can see those solid elements. And if I show everything and do my usual Control J to show adjacent, we don't have a connectivity yet, so we'll have to go to Validate, Free Edges, click both components, Preview Equivalents to see the golden nodes, and then Equivalents to make sure it's all connected together. Now when I do Control J, everything's connected. Now we're on to honorable mentions. I'll talk about Fuse for a bit, and then I'll briefly mention FE geometry. I'm back to the shell model where I have coarser elements on the left, finer elements on the right. Fuse is a reasonable tool to combine your shell meshes depending on your settings that you have in the Fuse tool. Those are in the hamburger menu. Important ones are the fuse threshold and whether you want to remesh the connection. For this tool on this model, I know that I need to go to the Validate tab and equivalence the nodes at the top and bottom of the shell. So I'll do Preview Equivalents with those comps selected. And then I have my fuse settings tuned well, and I can select elements on the left side and the elements on the right side, fuse it together, and it'll fuse them well, but there will be a bit of a remesh in the middle if that's okay with you. With respect to FE geometry, this is a pretty sizable topic, so I'll save it for another day, but it can be quite useful for creating connected 2D meshes, and then those 2D meshes can even be used to make your solid meshes.